Hello my friends, my name is Rich and welcome to Greatest Rock and Metal. On Greatest Rock and Metal I talk about what I think are the greatest rock and metal bands of all time, based on listening to thousands of CDs, albums and going to hundreds of gigs throughout my time. And today I am going to be talking about the legendary metal band Iron Maiden. My introduction to Iron Maiden, I'm not quite sure when it came. It was either on a compilation album that I had back in the day. It was released in 1980, a compilation called Axe Attack that had a track from all of the great rock and metal bands, mainly metal to be honest, at that particular moment in time. And on Axe Attack there was the Maiden track Running Free. But it may have been a little bit later in 1982, listening to the Friday Rock Show and hearing that famous dum 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 Run to the Hills drum beat. So it was one of those. I would have certainly heard Maiden's Running Free before that, but I'm guessing it didn't really register with me on Axe Attack, and it was only when I heard Run to the Hills it's like, whoa, who is this? Because I remember very clearly hearing that song for the first time on the Friday Rock Show. For those of you who don't know what the Friday Rock Show is, it's a radio show that was 2 hours every week, presented by a guy called Tommy Vance, rest in peace, and he would play all the latest and some of the greatest rock and metal of that time. And it was always so exciting every Friday to wait to listen, Friday night, to listen to that show on the radio, because still like today really, you don't get metal bands on mainstream media. You've really got to hunt them out. Okay, it's easier to hunt them out nowadays because obviously we have the internet, but in those days you were relying on things like the Friday Rock Show, the odd appearance on Top of the Pops, and also Sounds magazine, which later had an offshoot that many of you will know, Kerrang magazine. So that was my introduction to Iron Maiden, and I instantly became a mega fan, and I'm still a mega fan to this day. I bought all of their albums, you see some of them here, and I've attended gigs on most of the tours that they've done throughout their career since the first tour that I went to in 1983, but we'll come on to that later. So, a little bit about Iron Maiden history. They started 40 years ago, and that is why I am doing this video, because it is the 40th anniversary of this album, the debut Iron Maiden album, and we'll come back to this in a little while. So 1980, the first Iron Maiden album hits, and then like many bands in those days, the albums keep coming. You had very quickly after that, where is it? You had Iron Maiden Killers the following year, the absolute classic the following year after that, the Number of the Beast album, and this was the album, Number of the Beast, that really shot them to fame, with that song that I mentioned before, Run to the Hills, but also the Number of the Beast song. They were two massive singles for Iron Maiden. And actually, one of the interesting things about Iron Maiden, they were one of the few heavy metal bands that always had great success with their singles, in the UK anyway, in the UK. And then the year after that, we had in 1983 Peace of Mind album, and that was the first the tour for that album was the first time I got to see them. Probably the pinnacle of Iron Maiden's career in the early days came with this album, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. And in a future episode, I will talk about the legendary 1988 Monsters of Rock show at which they performed. Now, I've already mentioned that before when Halloween played there as the opening act on that day. After that, really, their career started to decline. There was the one-off success. They had a #1 single in Britain with Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter. But then really the career started to decline. The singer Bruce Dickinson and one of the guitarists, Adrian Smith, left the band. They brought in a new singer, Blaze Bayley, and I really enjoyed the Blaze Bayley era. Was it as good as Dickinson? No. Was it as good as the singer who appeared on Killers and Iron Maiden, Paul Di'Anno? No. But they still made some great songs, some of which are still in the set list today, sung by Dickinson, and amazing parts of that set list. I talk about today because Iron Maiden are still going strong today. Adrian Smith and Bruce Dickinson returned to the band in 1999, I think it was. Don't quote me on that. And since that period of time, they have just been going from strength to strength and are still a huge heavy metal band all over the world today, and have more recently just celebrated this tour that they called the Legacy of the Beast tour, which had an amazing set list featuring songs from their entire career. So, let's talk about the 40th anniversary album. 40 years ago, this amazing album was released, simply titled Iron Maiden. And for the 40th anniversary, they have released this special limited edition picture disc version. And if we take it out, what we have in here is Eddie the Ed, their mascot that has appeared on all of their albums, on the artwork for all of their albums. And there's the back of it. Okay, so what can be said about this album? Well, first off, I would just like to mention this 40th anniversary release. Although it looks gorgeous and is a lovely piece of art, I have to say, to be honest, like most picture discs, it doesn't always sound that great. It's okay, yeah, but it's not at a level of the normal vinyl. And anyone who buys picture discs know that. You're really buying them for the artwork and the limited edition nature of them. But doesn't matter, because of course I have the CD version here, and prior to that I had the older CD version. One of the things that I'm sure many of you have found, that you've bought the classic albums many times over the years. I first had it on vinyl, then I had it on CD, now I've got it on remastered CD, and now I've got it on vinyl again. 4 times Maiden have had my money. This is why they are so rich, because I won't be the only one who's done that. In fact, I'm sure there's some of you fans out there who bought the same album more times than that. You probably had cassette versions, other remastered versions, etc., etc. And need I go on? So let's talk specifically about this version. It's a legendary album. It's got some great songs on here, songs that define Iron Maiden still today. The main leader of Iron Maiden, the bass player Steve Harris, he has criticised the production on this album, and for me it's okay. Is it as good as the production? done by the producer on the subsequent albums, a guy by the name of Martin Birch. Rest in peace, Martin. No, it's not, but it is still a good sounding album in my opinion. And more importantly, it has some great songs. I'm just going to slip that back in here. So, I can talk about the track listing. As always, when I feature an album, I will pick my 4 favourites. And first track, Prowler. An absolute classic song. That's your introduction to Iron Maiden. It's a shame it doesn't get played so much nowadays, because I would certainly put this one in place of another song that I'll come on to in a little while that didn't make my 4 favourites. But Prowler, that's the way to start an album. Walking in the city, looking oh so pretty, I just got to find my way. Yeah, love it, love it, love it. The second track I would pick, well actually this was the one that was on the Axe Attack album, and at the time it didn't grab me, but over the years it certainly grabbed me, and it's a song that actually for me came to life when I heard it on this album, their first live album, Live After Death. It featured an extended version, and that's when I kind of got more into the track. And the track is Running Free. I'm running free, yeah, I'm running free. Great chorus. I don't know why it never grabbed me first time around, but anyway, it's got me now. Next track I would pick would be the last track on side 1, the legendary track titled Phantom of the Opera. This has some brilliant guitar work in it, and one of the things those of you who are old enough to know about this will remember, going back into the 80s, there was a famous advertisement for Lucasade, the energy drink Lucasade, and it had the riff to Phantom of the Opera in it. And it was a very famous advertisement, and it featured an athlete by the name of Daley Thompson, a British athlete who was also very famous at that time. And that song, for me, unfortunately, will always be associated with that advert, because I heard it on the advert even before I knew it was Iron Maiden. Because as I said, it was a little bit of a late starter getting into the earlier Maiden stuff. The fourth track that I would pick. Now, many people would pick a track that's on here and has been in the Iron Maiden set list forever. It's been played at every single Iron Maiden show, and it's the title track, Iron Maiden. But for me, it's one of the weaker tracks on this album, and to this day I still don't understand why it's constant in Iron Maiden's set list. Yes, it's a big showpiece when they bring out the giant Eddie, but they could do that with other tracks, because for me there's much better tracks in the Iron Maiden catalogue. So my fourth choice is the track Charlotte the Harlot. Why? Well, as a young kid, to hear a song about harlots, it was great. Any songs that included things about sex, or things or songs that had swearing in, as a teenage kid, it's like yeah, get a load of that, mum and dad, as I'm blasting it on the stereo. And Charlotte the Harlot also was a great track. It wasn't just about the lyrics, it was a great track. Such a great track, they actually did a sequel to it on Number of the Beast, titled 22 Acacia Avenue. So there you have it, the 40th anniversary of the debut Iron Maiden album. A brilliant album, a classic album. Okay, maybe it doesn't sound as good as some of the others, but to my ears, it still sounds great. You crank it up and you will get plenty of enjoyment out of this great album. So, let's talk about the first time I saw Iron Maiden. But before we do that, let's take a look at rock t-shirts by the Sea. Hope you enjoyed that. So, as you will see and just saw, the Peace of Mind tour, the Iron Maiden Peace of Mind tour. This is the original t-shirt. It's quite a bit tight on me, but wow, what can I say? That was my introduction to Iron Maiden. This is the ticket. It was at Manchester Apollo. The date was May 1983, and as always when I look at the old tickets I like to look at the price. £4.50. £4.50 English pounds to see Iron Maiden. Wow. Wow. So the Peace of Mind tour, the album Peace of Mind, this was the tour for me where I was now old enough to go to gigs. And it was very early in my gig going career that I was able to see Iron Maiden. I think it was probably the 4th or 5th gig that I had seen. And again, great excitement, great anticipation, and the set list was awesome. This set list, wow. Opening with Where Eagles Dare. Again, another track with a brilliant drum beat. I love Where Eagles Dare. It's been the ringtone on my phone for God knows how long. And when I heard that the track was included in the new Legacy of the Beast tour set list, I had to go. And I'll talk about my trip to see Iron Maiden on the Legacy of the Beast tour another time, because that was a hell of an adventure. But back to 1983, and we have tracks like, I'm going to rattle some of these tracks off. We have Wrathchild, we have The Trooper. Now that's a classic that's still in the set list today and well deserves to be so. The amazing artwork for The Trooper is over here, and what a song. Anybody who loves Iron Maiden loves The Trooper. We had Revelations, Flight of Icarus, Die With Your Boots On, 22 Acacia Avenue, Number of the Beast. Still Life to Tame a Land. Now, one of the things you notice if you know about Iron Maiden and if you know the Peace of Mind album, when they tour an album, they tour the album. So you always get a lot of tracks from the new album. So in the first 2, 4, 6, 8, in the first 10 songs, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, you get 6 of the new tracks on the new album. Now a lot of bands won't do that because they feel like, oh, the fans haven't got a chance to get to know the new material and get into it. Maiden, very different. They're not afraid of the albums they've created, and I love them for that. Yeah. There's other bands out there that I enjoy immensely and have a great time at their gigs, but sometimes I do wish, oh, come on, mix up the set list a bit. We've had the same songs for the last X number of tours. Metallica are a little bit guilty of that for me. You're always going to hear a lot of the same tracks in a Metallica set list, their greatest hits, so to speak. AC/DC especially are guilty of it. And yet Metallica and AC/DC are two of my favourite live bands. So, okay, I understand why they do it, but one thing I really love about Maiden is their ability to put set lists together and not be afraid of the new albums. Then we had Phantom of the Opera, Hallowed Be Thy Name, and this track Iron Maiden to close out the show. Then they came back for 2 encores. Run to the Hills and Sanctuary was the first encore. Oh, 3 encores. Then they came back for Drifter, and then they came back for Prowler. Now obviously I can't remember the detail of the set list, it was nearly 40 years ago. But what I do remember was having a fantastic time. It was very exciting to meet Maiden. what was just as exciting after the gig, and Maiden used to do this a lot, is that I went backstage after the gig and waited for the band at the back door. When I say backstage, waited at the back door with many other fans, and we waited and we waited, and eventually a member of Maiden's crew came out and got the fans that had remained, brought us back into the venue, and we got to meet the band. And I had my program signed, and it was awesome. Now this was the day, way before the days of having a camera in your pocket, so sadly I never got any pictures with the band, but I did have a signed program from the Peace of Mind tour, and now someone else has it because they stole it. And they also stole my Power Slave one, which was also signed. To this day, I don't know who stole it. It was somebody who was a friend, because it was stolen from my house. And devastating to not have those today. Because not only would they be worth money, forget that, I would never sell them. To have those two pieces of merchandise today would be incredible. But I still have the memories, and that's what counts. And I hope you've enjoyed that I've shared the memories with you today. If you have, please don't forget to press the red button to subscribe, please, so that you can see future episodes of Greatest Rock and Metal. And there will certainly be future episodes on Iron Maiden. But before I leave you, I always leave with 4 recommended albums. And that is very, very difficult to do with Iron Maiden. Now, Iron Maiden fall into 2 eras for me. Many could argue they've had 4 eras, given that they've had 3 different singers, and this 4th era that I'm going to talk about, which was from the 1999s onwards up till now. So for my recommendations today, I'm going to take my 4 choices from that first era, which is 1980 up to 1990. And the 4 choices, of course, in that list has to be Number of the Beast. That is the place to start with Iron Maiden. Then it starts to get tough. I would go, because it's where I had my first gig experience, and I still love this album to this day. There's some great tracks on it. I would go with the Peace of Mind album. Then the Power Slave album, which has that great 1-2 opening of Aces High and 2 Minutes to Midnight, and also the massive epic track Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And for a 4th, and this is where it gets tough, because I'm tied and I don't do ties, so I'm gonna go with the one that we've spoken about today, the debut Iron Maiden album. They're my 4 picks. Again, as I said, please subscribe to the channel and enjoy more of Greatest Rock and Metal. Until next time, remember, we rock.